Today we're going to save Call of Dragons. And okay, maybe that's a little bit clickbaity, but
I mean, just a bit.
If we look at what this game was based on, that's Rise of Kingdoms, it's really unusual that the predecessor to a new game outperforms the new game. And yet, when we look in the App Store, we see that...
Okay, so he says here that RoK outperforms, right? So let's go. So we're gonna Google Trends this. And then we are going to go, right, just so we can take a look for ourselves, because it's always very important to do so, right? And we're gonna look at things appropriately. So let's look at Rise of Kingdoms, video game, right? Then we're going to go worldwide. We're going to go past 5 years, and we'll do all categories of web search, right? So when you look at, this is... right, as we start kind of getting, right, March, whatever it was, right, the release date, right? This is kind of release date area. And you can see here that at peak, so first and foremost, let's give some clarity here, right? Because personally, I think when you say something in that type of a broad and vague way without giving historical data references, it can make it seem very like RoK's 100, COD 0. Right? Of course, that's not what he's saying, but I just felt that it was important to kind of show you this. So this is just general trend. There's other data that we can look at as well, but just to kind of keep things as simple as possible, right? So if you look at when, well, first off, right? So let's look at Rise of Kingdoms release date, right? So this is global, right? Official global. Now there's also Rise of Civilizations, but I don't think that we are going to get... I think it's the same thing. We'll double check. Yeah, see, May 24th. Same thing, right? Because that was when they rebranded. So, May 24th, 2018. Right? Now, bear in mind, this is December. Let's see if we can go back a little bit more. So, let's do custom time range. And the date we want to go to is... what did I just say it was? May 24th, 2018. So, January, February, March, April, May, 5. Got to count. Don't judge me. So, let's do... That's the 24th, right? I'm having like a short-term memory loss. Okay. So let's do this. 2018. Right to today. Right? Okay, here we go. Let's pull the data. So, to here. Okay, cool. So, we have this going back, what, June of 2018? So, what, May, June? Okay, right? So, we're basically at the beginning of that month. So let's look at the data at release. So the data at release, right, for interest level at that time, right, wasn't that high. It obviously started generating, you can see here September, right, so you're a couple months down the road that you're getting it, right? But remember, the number that you need to pay attention to, so look at this. So the game was out, just to be clear, if you're going to compare games, you need to compare the timelines, I feel, for when that game was released at its time versus when the game is released now. Now, yes, things will be different as obviously years go on. You'll get more general interest. More people will probably get into mobile. There's other factors as well. But I think a little bit more of an apples-to-apples comparison is a lot more accurate. So if you look at the trending data, you will see that there was 3-4 times in which the game peaked over 50. Right, for interest. And to gauge this, right, it says the numbers represent search interest relative to the highest point on the chart for the given region and time. A value of 100 is the peak popularity for the term. A value of 50 means the term is half as popular. A score of 0 means there was not enough data for this term. So, right, we're kind of going over, search results, if you will. So you can see here that the first time the game peaked over 50 was right here, April 2020, right? Almost 2 years after the game was released. Bear in mind, this is global. You're not accounting for all the time that the game was in beta. This is 2 years after global release, right? Game was released, right, March, April, right? So you're looking at April, where COD peaked at 51, right? That's a month, less than a month, and the game peaked that, where it took RoK 2 years. And you're trying to say that the game is not as popular. The game's already outperforming RoK by a landslide for the first 2 years. Of course, we're now needing to look at sustainability. We're just looking at opening, right? So now if you look at sustaining, right, you can see that the sustaining is just below 25, right? So sustaining, 16, 13 when you're looking at averages. If you're looking at sustaining here, right, it was a little bit higher, right, when you're looking at that even in the early days. So sustainability obviously is not there, right? Not as close to it was in the beginning. But the peak potential was there. Oftentimes when you have that level of interest, what really matters is how are you sustaining the game beyond that point? And a lot of that factors into, well, what are the features? How are updates playing? What's the community's interest level? That's really up to, in large part, the developers making sure that they're doing things in the game that are going to keep people playing it. And so I feel that in a decent way, this is indicative of that. But the potential was here, which, if you look at this, is in line with where RoK is currently, right? So that isn't too far off. The potential is there. But now it's just a matter of, all right, can we get some of these fixes? Can we see that trending back? So I think that's how I would have explained this part. Let's continue.
That Rise of Kingdoms outperforms Call of Dragons in terms of how well it's ranked and how many people are down in this video for my thoughts on the things that the developers can do to dramatically shift the experience of playing Call of Dragons for the better. And
it says dramatically
we got a lot to talk
here.
about, so let's get started.
Now we're going to go to a 6, I think.
So the first thing we're going to talk about is going to be the betrayal meta.
Here
Now
it comes,
look,
the infamous
it's
betrayal
no
meta.
secret that not only were we betrayed by the Dragon Fam in the last season, but we were betrayed this season by the Seals and MILF group. And I suppose it was really obvious they would betray. Like, literally, their leadership.
So I just want to pause here for a sec, right? Maybe I'm reading too much into this. You guys can let me know in chat. But when you say something like, oh, it was obvious that they were going to betray, and he's about to go in and essentially state the history. My thing is, like, can you really have that kind of reaction to them betraying you if you publicly state that there was a level of expectation and somewhat caution, but you still decided to get into the relationship? My view is that, right, what's that thing, like, if it smells like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck, right, whatever that saying may be. I mean, that's just how I feel about it. Like, if I said that, and I came out and said, oh, yeah, well, we allied with this group, but we already had a really good feeling that this was going to happen, and then it happens, do I really have the right to come out and feel some type of way about it? Now, maybe I could talk about it objectively, but I feel like I don't have the right to say, okay, well, this is the thing that led to that. That's just my view. Moving on.
Switch sides, like, every time there was a different winner each season. So, without getting into those details, they switched back over to our fam when we lost, back over to the Dragons, right? But the point here is that the betrayal meta in this game is insane. And it is the meta. And I called it the betrayal meta when I was talking about how we were betrayed in a way that ruined the season for everybody. And, that might sound dramatic. What is this betrayal meta in Call of Dragons that's ruining the experience? And it's so easy to understand. Let me explain. Rise of Kingdoms, the predecessor to this game,
that's a good point,
is a community game that has war. But Call of Dragons is a war game with temporary short-term communities. And then
okay, so I'm going to pause here. This is actually the first point that Chiz makes that I do completely agree with. And that's because you have to understand how CoD is set up. There are no home kingdoms. There are no going from a KVK environment back to a home kingdom, right? When you start in a home kingdom, you basically are then immediately going into what you would argue is a forced KVK. Also, when you factor in the reset system, it really enhances this idea of that you need to kind of be putting your alliance first above almost everything else. Whether that's coming from the alliances themselves or if that's coming from the players that are looking for opportunities. And because you also don't have this chance to really create, right, which is mentioned as a community, and again, I'll dive a little bit more deeper into that, but the short version I'll say here before we continue is that if you had home kingdoms, you have to look at it. This is something I talked about before. If you look at the average new kingdom that's coming out, most of these new kingdoms are taking this mega alliance style approach where they're basically funneling into the top alliance. This kills so heavily the player base, the remaining player base that's in a new kingdom, because it doesn't allow for them to participate in a lot of other avenues. Usually if you have an alliance that's just herding and gathering all the top players, some of the challenges that will come from that is, well, what happens if that top alliance wants to go and start capping all these other behemoths, right? Because maybe they want to have the highest member capacity that they can have, right, going into Season 2. Maybe they're not wanting to share. They're not wanting to divvy up some of the other behemoths. Maybe they're going around and attacking all of the Guardians. I think they're named something else, but essentially the Guardians, right, where you'll get the boosts and runes that will drop, right? They're not letting anyone go and do those. And there's really a few other things that you can really say about the same thing, but the challenge is that if you're a new player coming into the game and you don't get this opportunity to advance, and that could be something else. Maybe the top alliance doesn't allow anyone else into Zone 3, right? Maybe they also choose to dictate how many alliances can go into Zone 2, right? Maybe during Kill Event, they decide, well, because no one's really participating, we're just going to go around and attack everyone and hunt everyone for 24 hours. All of those things fall under negative new player experiences. And it's one of the fastest ways to kill a kingdom. And then what do you think is going to happen if you're not having a lot of activity, right, in general, or you don't have a group or a project or some type of structure or organization in the home kingdom? It's very easy just to, rely on your backup plan, which is to pyramid funnel into a top alliance. And so what goes from you starting out with 5,000, 10,000 players in a brand new kingdom, whatever the number may be, quickly dissolves into, 1 or 2 active alliances worth, which is a couple hundred players, right? And I'm sure there's more than that. They're just dispersed throughout. But when you're talking about quality hyperactivity, a couple hundred players, right? 1 to 2 alliances worth on average. And the fact is that if you focused more on kingdom building instead of alliance building, you'd have more than hundreds. You'd have 1,000, 2,000 active players. And then the question you have to ask yourself is, well, is my game going to make more money with potentially thousands of people playing in a kingdom or hundreds of people playing in a kingdom? It's a simple numbers game, right? You're playing the percentages. I have a higher chance to make more money if I have more players that are active and sustaining that activity, and we have low player retention, compared to how the game is now, where you don't have that many people. You look at RoK kingdoms, and RoK kingdoms have quite a lot more general activity. And whether it's because of just how the game was built or what they figured out over a period of time, I personally think it's a combination of both, right? Kind of community and developer sandbox. It is a better way to do it if you don't have a good idea from the ground up on how to build an alliance-focused game. And that's where we often talked about this whole identity crisis thing that CoD seems to have, is just, it's like they took RoK and they said, okay, let's just, instead of it being kingdom, let's just call it alliance-focused, but not really build in things that are going to allow a community to sustain itself in that system. You basically would have to create almost an entirely new game to really focus on an alliance-based approach versus using a kingdom-building model, right, which is what RoK has, and it is what CoD has, right? Your foundation is kingdom building, but you're trying to kind of overemphasize this alliance-based approach when your foundation is kingdom building. Is a kingdom-based approach. And that's where it feels like there's this identity crisis in there, because it's like they're trying to force the game to be something it's not. And that comes from, again, having a general understanding on how things like player psychology works, why you're seeing certain trends that are happening in the game. And for someone like myself, I love doing this stuff. Like, I love going into kingdoms and just looking at why things are happening. And anyways, I'm rambling at this point. So let me check chat, and then we'll come back to... Let me check chat real quick, and then we'll come back to the video. I'm just curious if anyone said anything here that I'm missing. Let me see. Nigabono, person I think. Data, we can also check Sensor Tower. CoD riding the coattails of RoK, so there's already obvious interest. Looking dead alone, yeah. If you really want to compare hindsight is 2020 after the fact, you see all the red flags. This is the effect of losing Season 1. I agree with the short-term community. Acolytes agree the Mega Alliance thing definitely does ruin the experience. Money Making Tate, what's up, man? Welcome. Pinch a Hottie, welcome. That's a name. Agree the Mega Alliance thing definitely ruined the experience for at least me. Personally, my favorite time in the game was in Season 1 when there was 10 alliances per zone before everyone found into one. Oh, no, 100%. 100%. And Shellos, that's actually a great point. I'm going to try and come back to that. Let's continue. So, where am I at? I'm at 327.
This one distinction in the game design, and this is the game design, is dramatically hurting, in my opinion, Call of Dragon's ability to be the game that I think it will ultimately become, which is why I'm still here. Call of Dragons, as of right now, you have no kingdom identity, and alliances are literally destroyed each season. Your alliance is destroyed. Start all over. Communities are nuked.
So I'm going to pause here for a sec. So he says that there's no kingdom identity. 100% true, mainly because there's no home kingdoms. And you know, I think that's really where the throw-off is you have a lot of people that are coming over from RoK that are quickly figuring out that even though this game is being promoted as an alliance-based or alliance-focused game, that is one of the biggest foundational pieces that they are not used to. Some may enjoy that. But when you start to play for a while, you will eventually realize how negatively impactful that is to a community. And if the community and the players don't enjoy it, they're not going to play. And so, to me, and I'll just say this briefly, right? I'm not going to spend a long time on this point, but I will say, CoD is amazing. There are also great things that RoK does well. There is nothing wrong with taking the good things that RoK does and applying it to CoD, but keeping the unique things that CoD does, in which separates it from RoK. Let's continue.
So, like, there is no permanent identity in this game for your community in the same way that there is in Rise of Kingdoms. And if there's any one thing you
and let me double down on this, right? This is a good point from Chiz. He's right on the money. If you think about how a community is built in RoK, you have a kingdom, which is your home kingdom, and people that go into home kingdoms understand more so now than they did in the beginning, is that you don't waste your time fighting civil wars. It doesn't mean that they never happen. Let's be clear. But what it means is that there is usually a little bit more of an added emphasis because there's so many kingdoms that have been played out. There's so many jump projects that have been ran that players usually that are going in and making projects or going into new kingdoms have at least a small sense of ideas on how to approach building a kingdom. And they understand that if you're just going to have war all the time, then you're not going to be as prepared for when KVK 1 or Season 1 KVK comes around. So usually there's a lot more attempts at doing diplomacy, at trying to meet at the table halfway if you're not already a big group that's coming in. And then you also have to understand that they have tools in their game, right? Let me give you a quick example. So if we go to Rise of Kingdoms, King's Tools. Here we go. Let me see if I can show you an image real quick. Excuse me. Let's say, let's do this. Lost Temple, King interface. I just want to see the image. My God, you guys are killing me here. Lost Temple King. Let's take Lost Temple King. Let's say King. Oh, here, let's do this. King's Mail. That might be something. Here we go. Here it is. So, hope this isn't a video. It is a video. We don't want to watch this. Okay. If you can see this okay, let me hammer this point home here. What you will see here is that when you play RoK and an alliance takes over the final building, you will get some king tools that are available to you. One of those is titles. You can issue titles to other players that will that will be buffs, right? It could be like a research title. It could be something that gives you like 10% research, 10% building, etc. Buffs, these are kingdom-wide buffs that you can initiate for everyone in the kingdom, right? It could be anything from increased gathering speed by 10% for like 10 hours, or for like 4 or 6 hours, something to that extent. Gifts, you can issue gifts every time Lost Temple rotates, right? Someone new that comes in. You can dish out gifts to players that are in there. That could be anything from resources to gems, etc., speed ups. You have King's Mail, one of the best tools and features that, in my opinion, RoK has ever came out with. Such an underrated feature. This allows for you to message every single player in the kingdom. This can be used for a variety of ways. Namely, of some, which is you could send a kingdom Discord link in your description. You can start getting a bunch of people into your kingdom Discord to start organizing. You can send a mail out that is tips on best practices, on leveling, on how to do your armies, on how to do talents, on how to do hero pairings. You could send tips for events that are coming up, right? Let's say that you know what the weekly events are coming up. You send a King's Mail that has the weekly events and a quick how-to and guide on how to maximize those events. You could send mails out to people that you guys are going to be doing some fun games on the Discord this weekend, right? Friday, Saturday, Sunday, from this time to this time, we're going to do some fun socializing. The sky is the limit with something like this. Now, of course, there's more things they can add on to it, but the idea is you can message every single person in the kingdom. And that is one way that you create communities, right? You're basically treating it like a magazine subscription, right? Some type of way to inform and disseminate information to everyone in the kingdom so they can feel like they are a part of the group. A great way to do to community building, right? Then you have Kings is just a general history. Immigration, which I'm imagining is for people that come in to the kingdom. Honors and then skill, right? And some of the things that you see there. Point is, right, there's a system that's in place. Let's continue.
Take away from this video, it is that these war games are not actually war games. They are community games with war. And the second that the game focuses too much on the war and not enough on the community, then you have huge problems, which is, in my experience, the issue that I've had actually every single season that I've played this game. Okay? So now, you may be thinking, okay, well, I mean, come on. Like, how bad is this really? And I think the alliances resetting each season is something that we can talk about just for a minute here, which is that, okay, your leaders in this game do an astronomical amount of work for your alliances. And they are like the weapon for community engagement, where the game developers...
Okay, let me pause here. This is another really good point from Chiz when he talks about how the people that are really doing the community building is more of a, because you don't have a home kingdom and because you don't have a way to set up a kingdom management team, you are then reliant on the officers, the leader, and contributing members from each individual alliance across the entire game to keep the players engaged. Why? Because as an alliance, part of the idea is you're trying to keep your alliance as active and as healthy as possible. So usually that falls on the management team, which is a combination of the officers and the leader. So in order to keep the game as healthy as possible, the alliance management teams have to keep the alliances as healthy and active as possible, right? You see where we're going with this. So it's a lot, like I'm saying, it's a lot deeper than most people may think. And if the players that are playing in these alliances aren't enjoying or having a good time, then again, that's just going to further deepen their potential demotivation for playing the game. It could eventually lead to them leaving. And again, I think there's a lot more they could do with alliances. Let me say that. There's a lot more they could do with alliances that I think would allow for this type of additional engagement. And we'll get to that later. Maybe, or someone can ask me. Let's continue.
Developers don't pay them, but my gosh, they do a lot of work, right? It's these officers that put in the work, okay?
Preach, my man.
They are the organizers for the communities. They make it fun. The reason that communities, I think, succeed or fail falls very much onto these officers. But these officers have a lot to do that they don't have to do in Rise of Kingdoms. First of all, you have to re-recruit for your team every season. That's a lot of work.
Okay. I will stop this here. And I'm going to say this. he is like he's half right, half maybe not right here, and not right is probably the poor word of choice to use. But most of the time, when you were having before now, bear in mind this is from 4 weeks ago, is that when you were having to do this, right? Eric, my man, what's up, baby? Yo, shout out to everyone. Yo, can we show some love for a good buddy, Clash with Eric? Very big Clash of Clans creator, does a lot of competitive Clash of Clans work. Again, make sure you check him out. A good friend helped me out with some of the stream settings, my stream settings, which I finally came over to OBS. Right, Streamlabs crashed on me, so Eric's going to be happy that I finally switched over. But an all-around good guy. Again, big following in Clash, awesome gentleman. So this is the thing about this point, right? Is when we're talking about kingdom builders. Is that and I upped some settings too as well. I watched some videos, so I'm hoping the quality's a little bit better. I actually didn't realize this. I have like 110 meg download and like 105 meg upload speed. I didn't realize that it was that good. So I'm hoping the quality's a little bit better, even though it's probably my hardware I need to upgrade next. However, the point I want to mention here on why at this moment Chiz was kind of half right and half wrong is that the part that he's right about is that, yes, you do technically have to get players back into Call of Dragons, right? Back into the Alliance in COD, where because it was forcing the Alliance to basically reset, even though you could keep the name, you still had to re-accept people in. However, the other half of the part is that most of the players already knew what alliance they were going to, right? It was just a matter of them getting back in once the capacity got high enough, but they already knew for the most part they were going to join. However, one of the other unforeseen things that can happen from this is that sometimes players can opt to leave that alliance, meaning not rejoin it and join someone else because of just the unnecessary stress of having to reset every season and then waiting to join up, which you're also losing out on potential gifts. You're losing out on gift levels. You're losing out on alliance donations and potentially using the gems if you're a spender, and you're losing out on some of that early community engagement. These could all be negatively impacting, I don't want to say features, but feels, if you will, to lack of a better word, for when it comes to you deciding on, right, am I going to continue playing with this alliance or not? Let's continue.
It adds no value to the player experience. Re-recruiting is not adding value. It's double work, right? The next thing is that you have to filter players through a bunch of shells at the start of the season. Remember, when you start a season, your alliance starts with a lower member capacity.
Let's go here to
and then lastly, you don't have diplomatic efforts with your kingdom with 2 or 3 other kingdoms. You have diplomatic endeavors with dozens and dozens of alliances and leaders. And those leaders, because there's so much other stuff going on that these leaders have to do, there's a lot of switching up of who's the officer anyways and who's the leader anyway. So you have to manage dozens of relationships, and it's important that you manage them. I'm going to get to this in a minute.
Okay, so I'm going to pause here for a sec. The point that he's making here about managing a lot of different relationships is something that when you play Kingdom Builders, it is very different, right? Because, again, from Chiz coming from RoK and other people that are coming from RoK, or if you're coming from a game that has more of a traditional KVK or SVS sense that includes a home kingdom, most of the time you are doing diplomacy with a single or second point of contact, right? Meaning that you're typically going to conversate with one person, usually, and that one person is going to represent the kingdom and its alliances, depending on how many it has and its power, etc. Meaning that the diplomat typically should be someone who is in touch with everything that's happening in that kingdom. You should have a pulse on everything, right? Know a little bit about a lot, which, again, is also outside of your alliance that you're in, right, for whoever the diplomat may be. And that typically helps and makes things go along a little bit smoother in those conversations when you're trying to set up who's going to ally with who's going to pair with who, and then what's the matchup going to look like going into KVK so we know what those PvP lineups will be.
So there's all this work and effort that goes into Call of Dragons that adds no value, and so it's a tragic misallocation of the leader's time on the part of the player.
Let's go to 65.
That not only are your leaders stretched incredibly thin, but at the end of the day, you can just switch sides whenever you want. The game design literally rewards you big rewards for being a traitor.
Wait.
If you are flexible with your morality, literally rewards you.
How big?
Big reward.
How big?
Literally rewards you. Big rewards.
He seems so into that. I had to replay it a couple times.
If you are flexible with your morality, if you are flexible with who you play with, if you actually do not form community, then you could just join whichever side is winning. They'll probably take you.
So I'm gonna pause here for a sec. He's not necessarily wrong in this case, and I think a different way to approach this is that because the game focuses more on alliances, if you're talking about individual players, it's a little bit harder to sell a full alliance jumping ship, right? If you're a part of a union and that entire alliance is then going to leave, quote unquote, betray, if you will, and go to another union, right? Maybe some of them can get rewards if they contribute and they participate, and it also depends on usually how the number one alliance in that union, and then if they have any other allies, decides to work you in for end of game rewards. You can still get some rewards, of course, but for other types of not only I don't know if I want to say end of season, but for other types of rewards that you can get from doing behemoths, right, elite raids, etc., there are other things that you can get rewarded on. The challenge is that there's no guarantee that if you switch sides as an entire alliance, you're going to be in on some of those rewards. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. But I think what Chiz is kind of more going along here is that as individual players, it's, of course, much easier to leave an alliance, go join another alliance, and, again, quote-unquote, betray. Even though, I mean, personally, the way I kind of view it is that, these are just normal things that happen in Kingdom Builders. Because I know I've said this before, I've never heard this kind of betrayal meta verbiage ever used before. Because everything he's really talking about is just what I consider to be normal things that can happen in the game. You just have to have a realistic expectation that they can happen. However, again, the biggest reason why you could tell he's kind of doubling down on a couple of these things. A big reason why it goes right back to what we were talking about in the beginning, because the game focuses a little bit more on the alliance-based, on an alliance approach rather than a kingdom-building approach. Continuing.
And then you just get better rewards. Now, this is a huge problem. This is a catastrophic problem, undermining many things. But also, I have to say that game betrayals are the most negative experiences of my life. They're on par with, feeling like you have catastrophically failed at something you have done. Like, if you've ever made a huge mistake in your life, and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that, being betrayed by somebody else feels that way. It's disgusting. It's unpleasant. And it's a mix of emotions that, honestly, my life is better for not having these emotions, okay? So, right now, the game rewards people for being these sorts of traitors rather than being loyal, and that
And again, he says a little bit of the same thing, right? Just kind of continuing on and expanding. But again, it really goes back to the same kind of root cause that you have to understand, which is that because the game has alliances that are all separated, even though, that you are technically assigned a home kingdom and you can migrate, the game does not feel like the game has all of the fixings that would represent a typical kingdom builder that has a home kingdom in it. However, the game is trying to almost force its way to not do that, but at the same time includes elements that directly hammer the point home of having home kingdoms and being kind of this traditional kingdom builder. And so that's where, like we've talked about, that's where the identity crisis is that you have half of the game that wants to be this, but then the other half of the game that already has a foundation that is something else. And that's really where you're getting these conflicting sides from. Where are we at? Let's go to 8 minutes. That's the next one.
To switch alliances. I'm suggesting some basic human psychology that we need to talk about. And there's a couple things that I'm suggesting should not be in the game. That includes the ability to resurge and the ability to switch alliances.
Okay. So these were the two big ones, right? And I think this was the stuff, if you remember, that Crazy Bob ended up, our boy Bob, he was the one who kind of really started that initial, and I'm curious if I could find this real quick in general. Let's see here. So if we go, let's do this. Oops, hang on. I got to click here. let's do this, and then we'll do from Crazy Bob. Now, if I might have to go far back for this. We'll see how far back we have to go. I think it was a couple days ago, so. Man, it wasn't yesterday. It was definitely farther than yesterday. So, here it is. Can we have more? Look into Y. Yeah. Maybe. Oh, here it is, right? So, this is the one from the 26th that really kind of kickstarted everything. Where Bob comes out, no resurge, and maybe other people were talking about this before. I'm just saying this is the first, moment that I really noticed it. And you can see here, right, where it says no resurge and not being able to join alliances outside starting region is the dumbest thing the devs have ever done, worse than barricade. Right, and so this is, again, when you look at it like that, this is like the moment that happens, where you end up seeing that this is the suggestion. And again, this isn't me blaming Chiz or anyone else. I'm just saying this is the moment, for those of you that are wondering, where those two specific suggestions that came out, right, where Chiz had advocated or had recommended that, right, in his suggestions. Let me scaduce this over a bit, and then we'll go here. Oh, sorry. Do I need to read chat? What's going on here? let me come back to chat before we continue on. We got, let me see, huge. If your management doesn't have Meow Mix, feed the liver. What's up, baby? Pause. What's up? Welcome. Stab, what's up? How we doing, man? How we doing? Mental Logic, what's up? Welcome. Sorry, let me read some chat here real quick. So we have no one from Seals, WTF pause here too. Yo, Darth. He said, well, Chisgule lied to make you guys look bad. That sounds more like a personal experience than natural. James Johnson, we lost all of our T5s. They left for Dragon, and now server's dead. I agree with him. Betrayal is the meta. Again, like I was saying, those are just things that can happen, right? I don't really believe that it's like that. It's just it's you could argue it's more incentivized because of the fact that it's alliance focused, and you don't have this sense of bonding and community in general that you typically get from having home kingdoms, which is usually just as simple. And again, that's really what I feel like they need to transition to, because I just think the game would be a million times better. And that's probably an overexaggeration, but you guys get where I'm coming from. Chelsea says, I agree, though. This isn't unique to his kingdom. It happened in mine as well. Maybe not on the scale of a whole alliance, but at least for the individuals leaving their alliance and getting rewards. Yeah. But to be clear, our group was the one that betrayed BD after being treated poorly all season long. To be clear, we never asked for rewards, nor did we get any. Losing the season, just join whoever's winning. Now they are winning even more, and you get rewards when win. No downside of hopping alliances. JR Modified is part of the game. And let me say something as well. If you have home kingdoms, then you don't join other alliances that are outside of your kingdom. Remember this. If you have a home kingdom, it basically solves... Like, if you think of the fact that they had to create this feature of resurging, of now not being able to join alliances... If you have a home kingdom, it solves that. You don't need to create this randomly new feature of, oh, now you can't join alliances for this period. Because if you have a home kingdom, you can only join alliances within that home kingdom, right? Now, the resurging, maybe you could still keep, but the resurging would just be for alliances in your kingdom, right? It's actually kind of a win-win because it solves two things for the price of one. Sorry, let me continue, though. It wasn't for awards. He needs to stop. It was an internal issue. Had nothing to do with rewards. The season was already lost. Yeah, I mean, bear in mind, video is 4 weeks old. But thank you for the clarification. That's why they changed it. It shouldn't be a thing to lose a game, and then you just decide you want to win, so you go to the winning team. It's pretty obvious at this point. In another video, he cried about rallies. Big OP in war. I mean, bear in mind, they have fixed the rallies, which is nice. Chiz was stuck on the rewards for the betrayal, when in reality, the rewards are a drop in the bucket to what we spent in the game. I mean, that is more or less pretty true. I mean, if you're looking kind of big picture and kind of a macro view of it, it somewhat is. Steph says, I win S1 and lose all other. I don't care. I just play because my fam core BX people, all other people come and go. I just want to have fun with current people, and that will not change anytime soon. Yeah. All right, continuing. Here we go.
I'll cover that more in depth. I think switching alliances within your starting zone is fine, but switching to an enemy team is not fine. And the reason is actually very, very simple. In human psychology, there was a study done, I remember this from college very vividly, where they gave a bunch of college students posters.
I somewhat love this analogy.
And it was free. Hey, pick a poster for free.
But probably not
and
for
then
the
there were
reason you guys
two
think.
groups of these students. Now, one group, they got to pick their poster, and they kept it. And that was it. That was the whole thing. And then sometime down the road, they were asked, how happy were you with your choice? Now, there was a second group of college students, however, and that group of college students was given the opportunity to instead go and pick a different poster. So after some amount of time, they said, hey, we see you picked a poster. Do you want to pick a different one instead? And what they found is that the people who got to choose a different poster were less happy with their choices.
I'm collecting my thoughts. So it is an interesting analogy. I get where he's coming from. However, I would attune the relevance of the example here to that of, if you're deciding where you want to go first, I look at that more as like, oh, well, I'm migrating, or I'm a player that hasn't chose an alliance at all first. And then I'm choosing one for the first time. If I'm coming in from a kingdom and I just, again, maybe I don't have any ties to an alliance and I haven't played anywhere else and I'm looking for the first place I want to go. Or if I'm migrating out and I'm choosing somewhere else that I want to go to. I think that's when it becomes a little bit more, like, that makes a little bit more sense to me. I am a little lost on the analogy. That was the word I was looking for here, because part of me just feels like he's trying to tie that in to players leaving an alliance that they initially chose to stay in. But what if they were already there? Are you using that as like a passive continued choice that they're making? And I guess that's just where I felt a little lost on the analogy. Let's continue. 9:30.
I want you to understand this. On average, they're less happy. How's this relevant? The ability to just pick a different alliance in this game when it suits you is a disaster, in my opinion, and needs to be removed immediately. I think that this undermines player happiness in very catastrophic ways. It's both disgusting to watch someone betray you. It is disgusting. I think it feels disgusting to be the person who is doing the betraying. All around, the betrayal meta of this game, in my opinion, should be attacked by the developers at every opportunity. I even think that if they're going to leave that kind of stuff in the game, there needs to be a like really heavy traitor penalty buff that destroys you. But I actually think that's not healthy for the game either. So I think that the ability to betray and
don't be shocking. But okay, so let's touch on this one. So the idea of not being able to join other alliances. Bear in mind, simple solution here is you just create home kingdoms and then players can go in between, right? Those kingdoms, right? Or sorry, in between alliances that are within that kingdom. That's something that would drastically reduce this idea of jumping ship or switching alliances or kind of going to where the rewards are, right? Would immediately see a decline, and then over a period of time, you would actually see things improving drastically. If you keep the system the way it is, right? One of the biggest, and I talked about this in my previous video, one of the biggest challenges is that if you don't do anything and you just keep the current system where now you could do your resurgence for the first 7 days, but then after that, right, you can't join any alliances until close to the end. This, to me, is going to put even more emphasis on individual alliances opting to not necessarily work with, or maybe even more, have a temporary relationship with them, like way more temporary than just or way more feeble than a traditional alliance. Because if you can't move people over to alliances for behemoth rewards or captures, and yeah, maybe you can still do elite dragon at the end and some other things too as well, that can impact how alliances that are in unions or teaming up may affect how they view sharing those at the end, because it's just going to create that much more work. Doesn't mean that it can't happen, it still could, but at a later stage than when before. It could happen at an earlier stage. What happens if you're allying or you're in a union with alliances and you want to go and help those alliances out? Being able to swap alliances is very important. If you look at RoK and you're going through like one of the, and I assume maybe it still is the case, but in RoK, one of the things that you would typically do is you would have an alliance that would, and you could do this a couple different ways, but you'd have an alliance that would capture a pass, and then you'd funnel players into that alliance by leaving the current alliance, joining the new alliance, or joining the alliance that has the pass, teleporting into the new area, past the gate, leaving, and then joining back in your alliance. And it was one of, from what I understand, right, one of the fastest ways to kind of get into a new zone after the gates open in a KVK. And even if it's not that, just joining to assist in fighting, or joining to maybe move yourself around the battlefield, right? Personally, I am somewhat okay-ish with them having a teleport cooldown. However, I would like to see how this may affect if they potentially lower this a bit, if they may ever introduce home kingdoms, which I do believe they should. And then now it's, well, do you still need this teleporting effect? Do you still need this cooldown at all? Because part of me feels like I'd love to see them get rid of the cooldown. If you transition to home kingdoms and why shouldn't you be able to join alliances that are in your home kingdom, right? To me, I think that makes a little bit of sense, at least testing that out to see. And of course, you could always re-add it if you need. But again, I think that is something that would solve a lot of what you're seeing. Let's go to 1050, I think was the next one.
Should be removed from the fighting works in this game. Would be more fun if these things were changed.
Oh, this is the rally point.
And I want to talk about this particular pass, and I might even put some footage up on the screen when we're rallying this pass.
You did put footage. I wanted to see it.
There is a mechanic right now I covered in a separate video where you can get basically like bottomless merits by sending rallies at barb forts. But because rallies now defend themselves, you get absolutely wrecked if you're not paying attention.
And I'm not going to play this whole thing, right? Because obviously this has been fixed and they've updated it. But it was something that he was pointing out about the kind of broken rally mechanic. And then let's go to, I think 1250 was the next one.
I think that basically any slam dunk choice, one and half fixed. The next thing is that.
Hang on, before we continue, let me go back to chat and just read through real quick in case I missed anything. Let me see. Jared modified, then we copied it and improved and improvised. Blah, blah, blah. Lorenko, what's up? Welcome. St. Crows, what's up? Welcome. Sorry, Elixir production down by 1/3 true grade. The Home Kingdom BN suggestion sounds good. I haven't played RoK, so I'm not familiar with it, but IRC, there is a season of downtime of Home Kingdom, which I would definitely not enjoy. So, to be clear there, the idea on a Home Kingdom is that you're not there for a long period of time. Remember, CoD could set it really for whatever they want. My view is like you keep it to a week or two, right? You go back to this home kingdom for a week or two, either at the most or on average, basically just enough time to kind of line up the next season. I personally feel that's enough time where you can heal troops, you reorganize efforts, you redistribute players if you need to, you take another active tally, right? If you're sending some kingdom mails out to people so they can kind of prep and expect what's going to happen in the next season. Because the idea is that with the healing, you can get back into the fight typically a lot faster, so that means you don't need as much downtime or off-season between seasons, right? So you could really get the best of both worlds with the free healing system and the RSS system that CoD has, right? More so the free healing system. And then you add in a home kingdom that's a lot less of downtime than you have in RoK. Dude, Bob's your uncle, man. Mary is your mother. Just get jiggy with it. Sorry, let me continue here. Seems this guy has too much influence on Des. No one should have all that power. I mean, I don't know. I don't know the conversations that Chiz has. I don't know what the devs took or didn't take, right? But what I will say is it can be the value of providing feedback is that not everyone is always going to be in tune. And I'm not saying this about Chiz. I'm just saying this generally speaking. Is that not everyone is always going to be in tune on certain aspects. Right? Most of the time, players are the ones who become content creators. Right? And those players, in large part, continue to play the game from a playing perspective. I myself am a little bit different because when I started playing, a lot of what it was to educate myself and learn. Eventually, I started running jump projects and organizing my own. When you start getting into management, not only of alliances, but you get into project management, which essentially is kingdom-wide management, and you do this quite a lot, on top of which you have to understand, I have a lot of accounts. I had 250 accounts or so in RoK. I had 180 accounts in Infinity Kingdom. I have 280, however many accounts here in CoD. Geez, let me open this bad boy up. Right, I have 287. If you see this little person here, I have an account in every single kingdom with the exception of the one that just opened. This is something that I very much pride myself on, being educated, being well-informed, because I take time to research, I take time to go and look into these things. And so when you're looking to try and provide feedback for a kingdom builder, which is really what this is, the feedback can vary depending on who's giving it. And oftentimes, feedback can usually be better provided in a voice call setting, right, than a text-based setting. And usually it takes time to explain things. You may not be able to get an amazing point across with a long piece of text compared to what you can do if you're actually sitting across from someone or in a one-on-one, right? So for me, if I had an opportunity to sit down with the devs in like a Zoom call or a Discord call or something, and because, oh my gosh, okay, so let me just say this. In order to really get to a good place in understanding how to develop something, you need to understand what the mindset is of where the devs are coming from. Meaning these individual human beings. You need to seep into their brain like that brain bug from Star Troopers that got all the way in there. And you need to really get you have to grasp what is their thought process. How is the developer approaching the game? You need to get a hold of that first. Once you understand that, then you can start figuring out where to start from. Sure, is it great to provide suggestions and provide ideas and things that we think are great? Of course. Nothing wrong with putting that out there in the world. But the challenge is that unless you're really approaching something or you're delivering something in a way because you understand the developer's approach, you may miss the mark in some aspects. And most of the time that can really only come from being able to sit down with the developer and ask them questions such as, why did you want to make the game in the first place? Right? Why did you introduce this feature? What is your hope for the game? What do you want it to be? Like, you really have to understand those. And then you would ask them, like, again, I would ask them things such as, have you ran an alliance before? Or better yet, what is your understanding of how an alliance works? Right? How much management do you think goes into an alliance? I would ask them these questions so I could establish a baseline on how much do they either understand or really know about what goes on in the game. Because that's an incredibly important part. You could build a sandbox and you could build this framework for an amazing game. But if you're not immersing yourself in that game, which bear in mind, I'm not expecting the devs to do, right? If you are spending the majority of your time designing and producing, it's like the difference between someone who is on-air talent versus someone who's in the production booth, making the on-air talent look good, right? There's different roles, but most of the time you need to have a conversation and kind of meet in a middle ground, but often that comes from being able to get to a point where everyone has an equal understanding of where everyone's coming from. And so, again, I just feel there's a lot more to it, right? It's sometimes not as black and white as just writing up a really good idea. Sure, being able to articulate yourself in a video, I think, can help. But most of the time, if it was me, I'd love to sit down with like Asya and Leo and anyone else and just talk shop. Right, I think that, in my opinion, would be the number one best way to really go about it. But, this is kind of, where we're at and what we got right now. Let's continue.
When you zoom out, you see how these are white for enemies, or red if you're in a resource node. I guess they're red if they're attacking. And for friendlies, it's blue, right? Well, I think there needs to be an additional color. And that additional color, you can decide how it is that folks are grouped up such that they would be a different color. Whether it's, a part of an extended union or whatever, but people who you're allied with that are not a part of your union should be orange. And as I said, there shouldn't be situations where we're like yelling at each other in voice. And one of the situations where like people start to get really agitated is when.
So I'm going to pause here for a second. I really think where Chiz is going with this is that there should be an option to have more than just one alliance in your union. Interesting part about this is that once upon a yonder in OG Season 1, guess what? You could have 3 other alliances in your union. And then they took the feature away, and due to a public outcry, if you will, for really liking this feature, they ended up adding it back in. However, they reduced it by 2, so you could only have 1 ally in your union, which is what you see now. Personally, I saw nothing wrong with them having this feature where you could ally with 3 other alliances. But what's funny about this, and I'm going to sprinkle this in all day, baby, is that by having up to 3 alliances in your union, what is that telling you? All that to me is screaming is a home kingdom and a kingdom building approach. There's just so many things that give you a full circle, and it just goes right back to that. Why do you need to have all these extra features in there if you just come out with a home kingdom? It solves all of that. Once again, solving another thing. Okay, let's continue.
When someone is hitting an ally. Well, we have allies, right? Our friends in ANCS are allies, and they've been great allies all season. Okay? But, they're not in a union with us, so their marches don't show up as...
And so you can see that's the key point there. They're not in a union with you. Home Kingdom solve this, or just adding more alliances to the union? Personally, I would rather have Home Kingdoms because I think it solves all of that. But yeah, do I also think it would be cool, because I from what Chiz is saying here, this idea of adding on other types of color coordinating, do I think it would be cool is if you had a Home Kingdom, you could color coordinate certain things on the map that players and alliances from your home kingdom could see, and they would differentiate from others, and that could be something cool. Kind of like how your kingdom in a KVK and RoK chooses the color that all the alliances are going to build as. That is dope. Why not expand on that? Again, man, think about it, baby. Think about it. It makes sense. You boys dropping dimes over her. Okay, let's continue. Let's go to 15.
As orange, I have all these Darklings on the screen. I think that maintenance activities in this game are a little bit more time consuming than they ought to be. And by a little bit, I mean they're way too time consuming. So every season your heroes and their levels are reset. And every season your artifacts and their levels are reset. And that's, it is what it is. And the developers have caught on that hey, wait a minute, players don't actually like that. So maybe we shouldn't hard reset everything to 0, which I think is great that they're looking at that. But there is an issue here, which is that the Darkling levels are all different. So, here's a 19 and here's a 23. And the difference between a 23, giving 21,000 experience, and a 19, 10,000 experience.
Okay, I will say this. I don't want to say it looks bad, but I'm not going to say it looks great. And that's because I think that scaling is just too steep from those 2 levels. And that I feel like it's kind of what maybe a part of what he wanted to say, but just didn't mention it. But that's kind of how it looks to me.
Experience is massive. And in a game where hero levels reset and artifact levels reset, if you aren't killing the highest level Darklings, you are, strictly speaking, behind the players that are. So because in a season-based game it's so critical you are attacking the highest level things, my suggestion for the game would be that it should move in the direction of increasing the level of everything, and everything lives at the highest level available. So in my opinion, every Darkling or Dark Creature in this zone should actually be level 25. And every Darkling and Dark Creature and pet in every zone should be the same level. And they all level up as the season progresses. So basically, I remember playing Diablo, and it's like...
So, in short, what Chiz is saying is that as the timeline progresses in a kingdom, if on day 1 you can kill a level 1 across the board, then on day 2 it's level 2. On day 3 it's level 3. On day 4 it's level 5, and that's level 5 Darkling, level 5 Creature, level 5 Pet, etc. And I'm giving a very basic example here, but eventually to a point where you'll be able to kill the highest level Darklings in the final zone, or highest level units in the final zone. I will say this: I am not necessarily opposed to that. Yeah, I mean, could you maybe fine tune it a little bit more? Where, for example, let's say that in the final zone, right, you'll only have access to the highest 5 levels. And then maybe the spawning rate is something like 15, 15, 15, right? That's 60. And then the level 25s in this example, right, or the highest level would be 40% spawn rate. I would like to see them do something like that first before kind of doing this all or nothing. Again, I'm not opposed to the idea. I like the direction that his suggestion is going in. I would just like to maybe ease into it first before kind of getting to this point, which is basically kind of all or nothing, right? And again, maybe it's something that will work better, but I think you can do some fine tinkering before you get to that point. Next one. Let's go to 1722.
The Forces of Darkling.
Here we
go. The next thing we need to talk about is the feel bad of losing. And it is my opinion that in these city-based war games, you want to diminish as much as possible the feel bad of losing a season, because some number of people are like, F it, I'm just going to quit. This isn't fun for me anymore.
He's not wrong.
That's true in Rise of Kingdoms, and that's also true here. But it's actually much worse in Call of Dragons than it is in Rise of Kingdoms. And I want to explain that actually for several minutes. First of all, losing is worse in this game
Passion Bubble exploded
because there is no home kingdom. So, like, you're stuck.
It's not wrong.
And you're stuck with people you may, like, because of the betrayal meta, like, my life would be better for never seeing these traitors
I need to count how many
and
times he
our
says
opponents
that
are in literally in the same kingdom with us ever again. I want to explain that again so it's really clear. Never in my Rise of Kingdoms experience have I looked at large groups of people and said, my life would be better for never having to fight them ever again. But in this game, I actually feel like my life would be better for never encountering these humans ever again. That both betrayed us and also that are in our own kingdom. They also betrayed us. I guess that's why. But, like,
how about how many times he uses the word?
I think that's so important to understand. That games like this, in my opinion, ought to orient around growing community, even community among teams.
So let me pause this real quick. I didn't really need to go as far as we went there, but he is right in the sense of creating an environment in which you know that you've lost in as far as not being able, or you know that you're not going to be able to advance farther in the season, and to some that may feel like a loss. And when you're stuck in, your zone 1 or your starting area, there's obviously not as much to do as if you're out there in the field. And so the whole kind of feels bad of losing is really looking at that. It's how much can you really do? So it is a few factors. How much can you do when you're just in your zone 1? How much longer do you have to be there in zone 1 before the new season? And then how active is everyone at that point, right? I'm sure there's some others, but I would say those are some of the main ones. And all of those really combine into, well, am I going to keep playing? Am I not going to keep playing? Am I okay with waiting this long until the next season starts? I mean, these are questions and things that an average player may think about or will think about. And so this idea of kind of ending the season early or at a certain point where once that alliance feels like they are at this position, it just doesn't kind of go on that long. Sometimes you might not be able to help it. That's understandable. But other times, if it's like the difference between allowing every alliance to potentially make it into the final zone, even if they're able to get pushed out of the final zone, and then you can start pushing into their other zones, like bit by bit, right? It's doing it that way compared to the Infinity Kingdom method, where you could run through an entire KVK or SVS after the adjacent Zone 1's open and Level 1 passes, which open up first, right? The idea is you want people to make it to the end, which would be the final zone, and then you slowly release and open the floodgates going back to where by the time the season is about to come to an end, that's when you would, arguably open up their starting home kingdom, right? Where maybe there's a couple days of that, right? And then the kingdom ends, but maybe those players have an opportunity to go back to their home kingdom, or they have to stay there for 24 hours, and then after that they can go back, whatever it may be. The idea is you're giving everyone an opportunity to keep playing the actual game and enjoying and experience this new season instead of doing things in a way that are going to impact how they can play that season, right? Or how far along they can get into that season. Because you don't ever want players to feel like they didn't experience things to the fullest extent, right? But at the same time, players need to have a realistic expectation that even if you do make it into Zone 4, the final zone, whatever it may be, right? That you could still get pushed back. And to me, that always has felt like the perfect recipe. You give people the opportunity to advance as far as they can, and then the realistic expectation that, you know what, if their side's not winning or, again, they're just getting pushed, that's a normal thing that can happen. And then they could arguably get pushed back bit by bit at intervals back to their starting zone. And then regardless if you allow them to go into the starting zone or not, right, that you kind of have to figure that one out. But by doing it that way, you allow for players to get a fuller playing and season experience compared to really anything else. Moving on. 1915, I think, is where we're going to go to next.
The seasons are too long, in my opinion. As soon as the dragon is captured,
season's too long.
Activity in this game falls off a cliff. I mean, it just plummets. Both in the winning team and in the losing team, it is just a dramatic drop-off in activity. And it's even more significant that even the winning team is like, yeah, I'm done now. I don't need to play very much anymore. So as soon as this dragon is captured, the season basically should be on its way to over.
So, and I think, just like anything, if you've captured dragon and it's getting to that point, usually if you're about to capture dragon, most of the time it's because the fighting is over and you are free to kind of move about the cabin when the fastest seatbelt sign is not on. Right? That's really what it is. You are in a comfortable space within the final zone to capture the final objective. And that's because you probably have already won the war, or no one can really push you at that point because maybe they're not in the final zone anymore. So I do agree partially here on this idea of that if this is the final objective, then yeah, the season maybe shouldn't last that much longer after it. However, the other side of this, which I personally would like to see be done first, before we maybe get to that, is by creating I don't want to say a better map. I want to say designing a map where it allows for a lot of PvP. The interval gate openings happen in a way that doesn't take too long and isn't too short. And you give players and kingdoms and alliances, in large part, an opportunity to do as much PvP as possible and to engage in potentially as many like mini games. I mean, why not add like a Dominion type or a King of the Hill type mini game on the map, right? Which is kind of maybe what the statue is, but I'm talking about like an area, like switch it up, have different types of mini games where maybe one mini game that's sectionalized off adjacently between kingdoms or between zones is where you have 2 or 3 spots where you have to control, you have to have, it's only your units that are there, and you have to control those for a period of time, right? Or when you're in there, you're getting points if no one else is in there. Something like that, right? Kind of taking the statue approach where you send one unit in, but the space is a little bit bigger. Maybe you do like a capture the flag type thing. I mean, that might be difficult with so many units that are on the field. Maybe you do something where it's like last man standing. That could be really cool, right? Think about that. How much more enjoyable would something like the statue event be, or utilizing that space, if you filled it with as many players as you could, and then it was just last man standing. Whichever side has the last person standing, or whatever side gets white first, they win. So it's kind of like a Slayer. I'm using like Halo language here, but you get what I'm saying, right? You can even do something where like it's based on kill points. Why not do a different little mini game thing in the statue area, but in a bigger space? And then it's who can get to like 1 million kill points first, right? Think about different ways to approach building quality PvP that is going to also allow for an enhancement in the strategy and the tactics that is being applied by those players. Think about it. Sky's the limit. Sky is the limit. Let me come back real quick. How we doing? Really need to take a nasal decongestant. Let me scroll up and see what's cracking here real quick. I think there's a few more people. Taco SD, what's up? Welcome. Gothmog, what's up? Welcome. Man, we're almost at 70 people. Man, you guys are killing it right now for me. Little Rice Boy, what's up? Welcome. That's an interesting name, but I'll take it. About why they would increase Legion 360. Yeah, we can talk about that maybe in a little bit. Let me see. Keep up. New way alliances work. A lot of stuff. It grabs the straws. Definitely used his psychology degree well to distract, redirect, and then realign everyone's thought process towards his direction of thought. I mean, I don't necessarily know if I'd say that is exactly what was done. I just think that there are some good points that are made. I think there's some other points that are just maybe coming from a different perspective or different direction. And then I think that there's some points that are made here that just partly for me just feel like they may not be as well in tune with the kind of direction that we'd like to potentially see. I'm getting close.
Close?
Yeah. You guys can hang out though if you want.
Are you really done?
No, not yet. In a little bit. Almost done. Let me see here. We got Chisgule next. BN is, I heard that wine migration is going to be open to season 3. Yeah, potentially. Sorry, it should be by season 3. They said season 2, maybe end of season 2 plus, if not season 3. Penalties for betrayals, insulting. What makes games like RoK and CoD is how realistic they can be, and especially true in negotiations. Yeah, it's the aspect dev's goal. One word money. Trade twice, then the management got the problem. Criticism will be interesting. Final zone, sorry. Sorry for that, Waha. Let me see. Losing feel bad. But won't feel bad if the servers are more balanced. People, yeah. Currently, as the game is, Vicellos, it's the opposite of comeback mechanics. The winning alliance already is winning. And now they're winning even more because Behemoth boss, more Behemoths to summon. Yeah. I mean, yeah. You know, it's interesting to me. What could almost be a different approach is if the Behemoths were just walking around the map and you had to kind of capture them, like do the raid and capture them like a pet, and then you kind of get those stored, and then every alliance can only have like one that's stored. Again, I have to think about this a little bit more, but it's kind of the idea of, well, if you have access to Behemoths and no one else does, that's a big factor. However, if they built the maps in a way where you progress in the KVK throughout each zone, then everyone should have equal Behemoths to use in the final zone. That is okay. And then if you're losing in the final zone and then you eventually get pushed back in your own zone, that should be okay as well. Let me see here. Dev is the price to pay for being losers. Tell me losers just quit the game and most loses, and now the winners are bored. What I'm suggesting is adding some type of mechanic that only losing alliances can use, like maybe let the alliance spend RSS and hire mercenaries or something. It is interesting. Rainy Ruler, what's up? Welcome. Is there KVK on this game? I play RoK, but started CoD 3 days ago and already like CoD better, but damn, is it confusing? Yeah, it can be. There is KVK. Rainy. It's a forced KVK, happens after season 1. Straver says not a good time to play CoD now. Does not. Let's see. Sunrise, what's up? Welcome. Okay, here we go. Let's continue.
Like within 7 days of this dragon capture, the season should be over. But the way the game works today, I mean, we've been chilling for a week since the dragon got captured.
I think was the
We've got you've lost, and that includes really low-level resource nodes. Like you farm these in like 45 minutes. In Rise of Kingdoms, your home kingdom has level 5 and 6 nodes. These are level 3 and 4. Like, I think the resource nodes should be higher. As I mentioned, it would diminish the feel bad if the Darkling levels were higher. I think that's like a slam dunk, very easy choice to make. Okay. I feel like the time left in the season should be extremely short, and I think you should close invade our starting zone. And they are praying.
I want to point out, I actually agree here with the higher RSS nodes. Personally, I feel like if you're in KVK, right, you should almost be starting out in your zone 1 with, like level 5 or 6 nodes to an extent, and then raise those right, as you progress in the zone. I do somewhat agree, but I do think in S2 Plus, in our starting zone, there is up to level 6 nodes in there. So I think S2 Plus is a little bit better than Season 2 for what happened there. So at least from what I can recall and from what I can remember there of the Zone 1 RSS node level availability. But that is something I do agree with. Let's get to 22. Here we go.
On our kindness toward other alliances with new players in it. Let me explain. The Dragon Fam, and I have pictures of this, they're reaching out to the leaders of all the alliances in our starting zone, and they're like, hey, we'll give you endgame rewards if you give us your shell. It's easy. You just...
So, and again, I'm not going to play the whole clip. I'm just going to say this. This is one of those things that, I mean, let's just be honest, let's be real. It's a thing that can happen in these games. However, if you have home kingdoms, and you can only join alliances that are in that home kingdom, problem solved, right? Because then alliances that are from other kingdoms can't do that. Once again, think about it. Home kingdoms solve so many issues. So many. I'll be tying it all night. Okay, let's go to 2340. We're almost done.
Give us R5, or even just R4, or even just let us don't invade starting zones. I don't know. It just seems like a completely unnecessary asshole thing to do, to go invade starting zones, especially the way that they're doing it, right? The game design does not intend you to invade starting zones, but the game design is fully being exploited to invade starting zones.
Let's go to section 25,
could
15,
you be the honorable ones and hold your lives they have, and
here we go.
What is there across all the teams? But the point I'm trying to make is not to complain about this season. It's to sort of point out that, like, why does the game put us into a season where basically they just kind of like slop a bunch of players onto the map and they're like, you guys figure it out. And I think the game design should actually force fair matchmaking. And how do you do that?
So I'm just going to pause here for a sec. When he says that it just plops you on the land, essentially tells you to figure it out. I mean, bear in mind, that's what a kingdom builder is, right? When you think about how you play a home kingdom, and I understand he's talking more about KVK in this sense, but when you start out in a kingdom builder, that's what happens. You just get plopped onto the map. You can maybe choose or randomly assigned. I believe it is still randomly assigned, but then you can still choose, I think if they still have the starting relocation items there for your Season 1 home kingdom, you can move, right, to some of them. But for all intents and purposes, you are getting into the game, and more or less if you've never played a kingdom builder before, right, you would just view it as, oh, well, I'm in this zone, players are in that zone, these are alliances that are in this zone, and you're really told to figure it out. It's like, for those of you that have watched the 100 or shows like Lost, very good examples of basically what a kingdom builder is. That's kind of what you're doing from the beginning, right? It's people get stranded on a plot of land, and you kind of have to figure it out. Everything from communicating to, I don't know if I want to go as far as saying reestablishing your civilization, but recruiting, diplomacy, survival, who are you going to ally with, forming groups, trying to form some type of management or hierarchy structure. I mean, all of those things, right, you're basically doing. Moving on.
You look at player power and merits, and what I think the game design should be is that actually we go on an expedition together. You form an expedition team, which is 2 alliances, 1 union worth of players. Or an expedition team could be 2 unions worth of players, 4 alliances, whatever that is. You form an expedition team. However many players are designed to be on this in each of these starting zones. I'm sure the developers have a number, right? And you power balance each of the starting zones. So, we would have a Blood Family expedition team. Dragon Family would have the Dragon Family expedition team. MF would have their, MF Family expedition team. And ANCS would have their, ANCS Family expedition team. And these would all be like power balanced. Now, the reality is that if you were actually power balancing us, this map would have looked very different.
So before we get to the power balance, and I just want to point out, and this isn't to, again, put myself on any kind of pedestal. I rarely hear people use the words power balancing. Right now, I've been using these since I started playing RoK way back in the day, and when I started doing jump projects in those as well, my time throughout Infinity Kingdom. It is refreshing to hear people talk about this or to use these words. And maybe Chiz has been using this for a while. Again, I don't watch too many videos from other content creators, in my defense, if you will. But it is nice to hear other people say that because I just don't hear it too often. However, this whole expedition team thing, again, I'd like to maybe see it on paper for like how it visually looks and what it is, because this kind of feels like a spontaneous thought that he's trying to string and kind of articulate the idea. However, what it really sounds to me, like if we're kind of comparing, hey, should we try this expedition thing, or maybe should we just go to home kingdoms that we know already can be successful, and is something that he's already mentioned multiple times in the video, but then he throws out this expedition idea, and now I just kind of feel like I'm a little lost. Like, for home kingdoms, or not for home kingdoms, but you want the expeditions? Personally, I think on this front, once again, we should just add in home kingdoms to the game. There's nothing wrong with home kingdoms, and they solve a lot of the hurdles that the game is currently facing. And it still allows for you to keep Call of Dragons and its unique features intact without sacrificing them. Let's continue.
Why is it that I think power balancing is so important? Well, first of all, you get better fights. Way better fights if things are power up.
You do, because alliances and kingdoms are typically closer in power, which means that they feel like it's a more competitive and fair matchup, right? So typically you're more inclined to fight those. Unlike if you're in a KVK or you're fighting against alliances that have deep or wide power gaps from yours or theirs, that can be visually a psychological impact to players. Because sometimes, you'll have players that always look at the leaderboard. So if you have an alliance or players that look at them and they think, oh, well, why am I going to go fight out there if this alliance is double our power? Right? That's a real thing that some people will think. So there's actually a lot of good reasons on why you would power balance. Unfortunately, that's not really what they did for Season 2 Plus on the groupings. For those of you guys that saw my stat video where we pulled all the data to kind of give you guys a soft gauge of the group powerings and how they paired based on ranking numbers for kingdoms, at least in the 1 through 10 and 22 through 90 group. It didn't really happen that way. I would have loved for it to, though. Last one we're going to touch on is... Oh, this 27-25, I think, is something here.
Once, and have more engaging fights all season long. And I think that instead of a home kingdom, you should probably have like an expedition base of some kind, where like as soon as the season is technically ended, okay, you should go back to your expedition base, which is kind of like your home kingdom, and you do stuff in your expedition base. This is just my opinion, okay? And the expedition base is where you live for sort of like the cooldown from the previous season and the warm up to the next season. I don't think you should live in that space for very long. I really do not. But I think that would maybe make sense and could be really cool if like your team kind of has your own space that you're customizing.
So I just want to say this. The moment that he said the word customizing, you know where my mind went to when he says customizing your own space, your own base. He's like your home kingdom base, right? Or not home kingdom base, but your expedition base. My mind immediately went to Clash of Clans, right? Like it almost sounds like he wants to create a Clash of Clans type of area that people can go back to and can kind of chill. I just want to point out, I'm not necessarily against the idea. I just very much outweigh that with just adding in a home kingdom, right? Because I think, once again, it solves a lot of the hurdles. With that in mind, that basically wraps up like me covering this video. Again, I want to say that there was a number of good points I thought Chiz made here in the video. There were some points that I was 50-50 on, and then there were some points that I just didn't agree with, but again, that's just because I have a different opinion than Chiz does on some things. But there were, I would say, a number of quality points that were made, but that I did agree with. So, I thought it was good. That was a good listen. A good listen to.